Hello, welcome to Missy's Imaginings. How are you doing this week? I hope you're doing good. I hope you've had a restful week, and if not, get some rest, eat something fun, drink lots of fluids, and then get some more rest. So there you go. This week I have been working on a bunch of wigs to prepare them for the upcoming doll show on September 28th, 2019. Just in case this video actually is posted for a long time and it becomes the first video you watch, it will of course be past the event. So 2019 September 28th is the Crossroads Doll and Teddy Bear Show, and I will have a table at that show. It'll be at the Holiday Inn up by the airport in Portland. However, I think, if I understood the directions correctly, the actual doll show will be in a building next to the hotel. So I've got to do some research so I know where to drive next week. But that's as much as I know at this point. I will leave a link in the description below. So if you're local to the area or you're going to be traveling and will be here and you want to come to a doll show and say hi, then you'll know where I'm going to be. So yes, my work surface has looked like I was invaded by tribbles from Star Trek because I've had wigs of all colors and a couple different sizes burying me lately. So now all the wigs are hemmed. Several are actually finished with the elastic, but I still have to put the elastic in several. But the last couple posts I did on the website were for a SD sized female two-piece suit. So there's a jacket with a little flared peplum hemline, and then a skirt that has the little flares added to it. And I posted that, and then I got to thinking it would be difficult. You can inset those little triangles, but I didn't really want to fight with doing that because I hate having to go up and try to flip and go a corner and come down. So I revised the pattern and just made that top of where the triangle would inset a seam. So you can just sew it to one side, then sew the other side to it, which will make it a lot easier to put together. Then I thought, well, if the dolly happens to be in an office and the AC breaks down, she's going to want to take that jacket off. So she needed a top to go underneath it, and I just wanted to do a sleeveless top. So I posted that pattern as well a couple days ago. So in sewing the jacket, the mechanics of sewing that jacket are going to be the same as sewing the male suit coat. It's the same dynamic. You're doing the collar, then you're putting the collar on, the shoulder seams, then the collar on. Then you're going to be putting the interfacing on, and then you're going to be putting the sleeves on, and then you're going to sew from the sleeves down the sides. So it's pretty basic, and if you need the mechanics on doing that, you can go back to the video on sewing a suit coat, and I've already posted that, so I'll put a link down below. However, the shirt pattern that I posted is a little different because it's a sleeveless blouse, so you're not going to be putting any sleeves in. Instead, it will have a facing piece that will allow those sleeve edges under the arms, of course, to be nice and finished. So because this is going to have a little bit different mechanical way to put it together, I thought we could sew up one of these little shirts so that you'll kind of have a taste of putting in that facing if you've never done that. And I like, some people just do a neck facing and then each arm, but on doll clothing, because it's so small, then you end up with all these edges wanting to wrinkle and turn, when if you just do it as one piece, it has a better chance of laying nicely and staying down where you want it to stay. So the facing, front facing, is one piece, and it includes the neckline and under the arms. And then the back facing will include the neckline under the arm, and then it goes all the way down so that it also includes the edge of the garment that will overlap and where you'd put your snaps. So I thought, well, let's go ahead and put this shirt together. The other thing to note is that it does have an optional location if you wanted to put in a dart. I kind of worked with the basic set pieces. I posted a couple photos of my work on Facebook and Instagram, and you can kind of see the pencil line where those pieces normally would separate, because they have to be folded as they're sewn, together to match that line. But in cutting out this piece, it would just be a flat piece. So if you want that extra curvature on the front, you can go ahead and put in that dart, and that would allow for a more fitted bust. Also, this blouse, I can hear my daughters laughing in the other room. Sorry. They're having a good time though. But it has a slight gather from here to the center, and it'd be on each side, so it would gather and have a little pucker in the very center at the neckline, so to have a straight collar and then a little pucker here, and then I'll probably put a little embellishment, like some little sparkly something right here where those gathers come together. So it is tilted out because I'm allowing for that gathering that's going to be there, and that will also give more room in the bust. So if you have a doll with a larger bust, it should work. It should work. So that's the top. And then I thought, well, and the skirt that we're doing, because I revised the skirt, the pieces look like this. They're on the website. I only did the pieces that would include the new seam. So you would sew in your little triangle, one edge of it here, and then you would just put the next piece down and sew down and do the other edge of the triangle to add those little flares into the skirt. But the facing for the skirt will still be the same pieces as on the original pattern. So it will look like, let's find, and I have my suit pattern here. Of course, these are the originals, the masters, so to speak. So they don't have all the fancy branding on them, but these are the ones that are actually drawn with a Sharpie marker. So the facing for the skirt looks like this. So these pieces for the skirt will work with either the original skirt pattern or the new pieces, the new revised pieces. So I didn't redo these because it's all kind of one set. So these are all on the website if you want to try them. The one pattern is listed as a two-piece suit for a BJD SD size female. Then there's the revised skirt pattern, which is a separate PDF file because I did it later. And then the top is a third file. So in order to do the whole suit with the revised skirt, you would need to download all three of the PDF files. So just in case you're looking for just one file with everything, it's not. Right now it's three, and I just haven't gotten around to changing that. So with all that information out of the way, it is on the website, so you can go over there. I cut out the suit pattern out of the fabric that I mentioned last time. So let's grab one of these. And so it's the pinstripe gray fabric that I bought, and that's what the suit will be, the jacket and the skirt. The top, however, is another story. I was going to do a white top, and then one of you said, what about something brighter, like a bright color? And I thought, well, there we go, I could do that. And in debating on what color to use, I thought, well, I sew with a lot of blue already. I sew with a lot of pink already. What if I did like purple? So I grabbed my purple scrap bucket from my quilting scraps, and I thought, let's just dig around in there and see what I can find. And of course, I didn't have any one particular design that there was, enough fabric to do a whole top, because these are all quilt scraps, and so they're all hodgepodge. But what I did is just a mismatch of fabric. So I have several different fabrics. I have one that's like a leafy, it almost looks tie-dye, but it's actually like a leafy floral-y pattern for the collar, and I think the back. Then I have another floral for the back facing, and I believe the front of the top. I have a light purple little print for the facing. Oh yeah, and then the front is that same real defined floral. Have that, and then the back of the shirt is the I'll unfold these so you can get an idea because the color's kind of small. But it's, so it looks like there's variation in there in the colors. The purple is in the blues and leaves, so that'll be the back. And yeah, and then I did the facing of the skirt in a purple just because it's all one outfit, so it'll give a little continuity to have purple facing in the skirt, I suppose. Anyway, that's what I did. So we're going to go ahead and put together the top just so you can kind of see the mechanics of these. And just because my time is limited today, there's not going to be any animation. It's just going to be me rambling on instructions. So bear with me and we'll go ahead and get started sewing. All right, in putting together the top, there's a few things that I've done here. So I thought I'll show you where we are in the process because this will be your first steps to get everything ready. So we'll start with the collar. I simply put the wrong sides on the outside, so right sides together. I don't know why I said it that way. But right sides together, and you're simply going to sew up from the edge, across the top edge of the collar, and then down again. If you'll notice on the pattern, this longer edge is the neck edge because this is not like a typical dress shirt with a fold collar. It's going to be a straight collar. And so it's going to close in the back. So this wider, longer edge is the part that will attach to the shirt. So once that's sewn, I turn it right side out. Well, actually, I'll back up. I sew it, then I clip about 1/8 of an edge, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I cut a lot of that off, flip it right side out, and then I baste the bottom edge together. I also folded it in half. There we go. And I just took a tiny little notch right here. So there we have the little notch that'll show. That just makes it easier to identify the circle when or the center when I'm going to put it on. I'm all thumbs in my voice today. Sorry about that. Then on the facing, I went ahead and serged the bottom edge. So I don't hem this. I don't want any extra bulk because that's going to be laying against the front over the bust. And so I just want it to be as flat as possible, but I don't want it to fray because it's a cotton fabric. So I just took a serger and went right along the edge. You can also use a zigzag and make your stitch length small, and so it'll put the stitches close together, and then zigzag along that bottom edge, and that will also help keep that from fraying. Another idea is if you have pinking shears, which are the little etched scissors that make the little cross corner cut, then you can cut that with pinking shears, and that will also help it to keep from fraying. So any one of those methods, but you just want to avoid hemming that because that would add more bulk to that facing. I did it on the front facing as well as on the back facings, only on this bottom edge, and the instructions are on the pattern piece. So I've serged this edge on each of the pieces. So that's my nice finished edge. It won't fray, but I'm not going to hem there. On my pattern, because I used the little quilting scraps, I didn't have a piece that was big enough to fold and have this on a fold. So what I had to do was to cut my fabric 1/4 inch wider and then go ahead and sew it together. So it'll have a seam down the front, which isn't ideal, but I like the fabric, so that's what I did. So I also went ahead and finished the edge of that seam allowance so that it wouldn't fray. And then I've basted from the dot points here all the way across with a basting stitch, and I'm going to gather that, and I'm going to gather end to end as tightly as I can. And what I like to do is I like to pull the taut edge on the top of my fabric. The reason I like that is if any of that thread shows through once I put my garment together, I've got less thread to tear out with a seam ripper to pull that out and cut it off for showing than if I had the taut on the back. Then all this would be loose thread and I'd have to get more out. And I don't know if that'll make sense, but there we go. So I take the top thread and I'm going to hold it taut and gather, and I'm just going to pull it as tightly as I can together because I don't want a lot of distance there between that. I wanted to pucker it to get it all right together. So I'm just going to pucker that real tight and have that gathered. So hopefully that'll show up. Let me check my camera here if I'm behind it. So I'm just gathering, and that's going to be where that touches the collar. So I'm going to have a little embellishment on the shirt when it's done. So I'm going to go ahead. I won't tie this, I don't think, because, well, maybe I could. I don't know that it's quite close enough together to actually tie those thread ends, but I want it as tight as possible. So I'm just puckering that edge just right there in the center. So now all that prep work is done. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the front to the back pieces at the shoulders. So these are going to be sewn on with the right sides together, the shoulders here and here. Then I'm also going to sew the facings together at the shoulders. So that's my next step, and I'll be back to the camera. Our next step, with the back pieces sewn at the shoulders on both the facing, there we go, there's our facing, and the actual shirt part. Now I'm going to baste around the neck edge, and then I'm going to trim, well, not trim, but just rather snip, just a little snip about a quarter inch apart around the edges, not snipping into any of my gathers, but on either side of where that thread is pulling, because I don't want that to come out. And then once those are done on both the facing and the shirt, that'll enable this to lay straight a little bit better, because then all those little snips are going to separate. So I'll be able to make that a straight line a little bit better. So once those snips are in place, I've basted and put the snips in, then I'm going to go ahead and lay the collar on and both sides are the same on this instance. So I'm going to lay this raw edge against the neck edge and see how I'll be able to pull that apart, so it'll be easier to pin this in place. I have a notch here, and then on the facing I also have a notch so I can match up my centers. And then of course here I have the actual little seam in the middle of that gather that I can match that up. And I'm going to pin the center first and then work my pins out from the center, and then I'll check where that falls on the edge to make sure that I've got it centered correctly on the garment. So next I'm going to baste and snip, then I'm going to be pinning the collar to the shirt. Then once that's pinned, well, it might be simultaneous actually, because I'll pin that, then I'm going to pin the facing on, and then all three sections of shirt, collar, and facing, I will be pinning them and working out towards the edges, and that will have my collar sandwiched between the right side of the shirt and the right side of the facing. So I'll be able to sew that neckline and be sewing the collar in at the same time. So that's what I'm going to do next. I will come back to the camera once I have that all pinned together and show you what that looks like. So here's all my pieces pinned together. I have the collar is pinned inside. There it is inside there. I don't know if it'll show very well. Right here is the collar. And you want to always make sure that that raw edge of the collar is pulled up snug to the edge of your fabric, just so that it doesn't get lost and you end up having an end of your collar not caught up in your seam correctly. The weird thing about this, and I'll tell you, I was a little surprised at how it worked, but I matched my center, and of course I have this wonky seam in the middle of mine because my fabric wasn't big enough, which I think is part of the reason. But I matched up my centers, and usually I will make sure my shoulder seams also match. And in this case, they didn't match perfectly. They were a little offset, but it still fit correctly end to end with only a little slight difference, like maybe 1/8 of an inch at the top right there, and that's it. Everything else fit perfectly, and my collar was perfectly centered. So I think the reason for that difference in my shoulder seams of the facing not perfectly matching the shoulder seams of the shirt, I don't know if you can tell, but like here's the shoulder seams on the facing, and when I flip it in, the shirt shoulder seams are more towards the center. And I think it's because I gathered that, and I also had that seam, which added a little more bulk for mine. But I thought it was odd that even given those shoulder seams not matching, it still matched up to the corners. So I'm glad. I'm going to go ahead and sew it. And I'm going to start at the bottom edge where the hem would be, go up the back edge, across the neckline, and then down the other back edge, and that will put my pieces together. So once that's in and I take my pins out because I don't want to get poked all the time, then I'm going to pin the underarm seams like this, and then I will match up that shoulder seam. So I will sew around the armhole from edge to edge on each side. So I'm going to do that after I take all these pins out. So then the garment will be ready to be flipped right side out, and then we'll come back to the camera again. But just so you know why it's going to have more finished when I come back. So I'll go around what I have pinned here, then take out the pins so I don't poke myself, and go around the armholes, stitching with right sides together, the armholes of the shirt to the armholes of the facing. Then I'll flip it right side out, and we'll be back to the camera. So here is the garment with all the pieces actually attached, and I went ahead and sewed around the armholes here, and as you can see I went ahead and snipped to the stitching on the armholes as well. It just makes it a lot easier when you go to flip it right side out, and we're going to do that now. I'm grabbing my turning stick, so I'm going to take this spot here and kind of wrap it just around my stick a little bit and feed that back up through the shoulder. I'll do it on both sides, so let's see if we can do this smoothly. And also, I probably should mention, when you go ahead to do the armholes, you just want to be careful that you're not getting the collar caught in that seam. It wasn't really long enough, but if you have any weird wrinkles in your fabric, then it could be kind of problematic. So you just want to make sure that as you're going around this armhole seam here, that you feel, okay, yeah, my collar, I can feel it in there, and it's out of the way when you're doing that seam. So you just kind of want to watch for that. So now we're going to wrap this stick, and we're going to feed it back up through the shoulder seam on this side. There we go. Kind of pull it through there. Grab a hold of that. Okay. Whew, almost lost my stick. And gently, because I don't want to rip out a seam. Come on. There we go. Sometimes it kind of gets balled up in there. Okay, so now we're going to turn this all right side out. It's going to look so cute. There we go. Okay. And I probably could have went ahead and trimmed those seams, but I didn't. I was just too anxious, I suppose. And then I'm going to use my stick to kind of punch out the corners, and there again I should have trimmed my corners, but I just got too anxious to see what it looks like. There we go. So as you can tell, I have about 1/4 inch here, and on this side about 1/4 inch. So that collar ended up being perfectly spaced, which was nice. There we go. So then our shirt looks like this. We'll pull out that underarm there, and this underarm. There we go. So that's what our little sleeveless blouse, it's starting to look like a blouse. So there we go, there's the front and the collar's all attached. The next step I'm going to do is I can leave this with right sides out, and I'm just going to match the front to the back from the hem up to the underarm, and then I'm going to actually sew the facings together from the underarm to the edge of the facing on each side. And what that will do will be to actually close the side of the garment and to close that armhole. So that's what we're going to do next on each side. So you want to take the front and the back and start at the hemline. And I mean, you could start at the underarm if you want, but it's not that long, so we can kind of verify that it matches. The underarm seam should match and the hem should match, which it does. And then if the facing isn't perfectly matched in length, that's okay. It's just facing, and you've already finished both of those edges. And there would be a little bit of a crisscross, so you just want your seam to go where that crisscross would match, just because of the angle that it's cut. So you're going to end up like this, and you want your seam, oh here, I'll use this. So here's, like, if your fabric's crisscross with the little edge, you want your seam to come across right where that X is. So I hope that makes sense. So that's what we're going to do. If we match this up, let's see if it'll show better. So see how this one goes this way and this one goes this way. So those seams kind of make a little bit of an X. So we're going to stitch right there, which ends up being your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to do those. We'll flip the shirt and hem it, and then I'll be back to the camera to show you our finished project. And here is our little blouse. So the puckers turned out okay, even though I had to put a seam in the middle, and we've got just a little gemstone there to add a little bit of pizzazz where that puckering meets the collar. It's just a straight stand-up collar, and then here's how that facing looks. I've got a couple threads there with the finished underarm. Let me check our camera. Yeah, I guess you can see that pretty well in the camera. So, and then I of course hemmed it, and on the back I just used 3 snaps. Since it's 3rd scale, I go ahead and sneak in some of the bigger snaps. I usually buy the snaps and they come 3 sizes on a card, and this size is the biggest one, which on 1/4 scale, or you know, the toner size, or like a mini fee size, I don't like to use this big of a snap, but on 3rd scale I go ahead and use it because they're a bigger doll. So here's the inside with the facing all in place. I did iron this, but it kind of wants to puff up a little bit. But once it's on the doll and the bust will fill that out, then it'll help it lay down. And I did tack under the arms where the facing is, just to hold that facing down. So I do tack that down here, which kind of helps hold that in place. And then, yeah, so there's the snaps. So all that's left now is to switch up the camera, and we'll go ahead and see how it actually looks on the doll. So here we are. We have the top all finished and on the doll, so you can see how it fits. This is the Island doll Ada, 3rd scale of course, and she has what I would consider a medium bust, so you can kind of pull snug there. So she's not, you know, real tiny. She doesn't look like a very young teenager, you know, and more flat-chested. On some of the doll models they call them young teen or whatever, but she's definitely not the huge bust, so it's medium. But there is room here if you have a larger busted doll, that there's quite a bit more room that you could still use this pattern, and I think it would be fine. And then also in the back, we'll spin her around here, I actually could have overlapped the back a little more for her. So if you have a very large busted doll, just by doing that minimal overlap, it's going to give you that extra room in the front as well, because you're not pulling it, you know, tight. If you wanted it to be a lot more snug, spin around, then of course you could overlap more and tighten that up. So it's totally up to you on what kind of a fit you like. And do you like how I can spin this? Here we go. Yeah, that's my new thing. I was looking online and just at display turntables, and some of them were pretty expensive, and then you had shipping, and then you'd have to wait for them, or you'd have to buy 4 or 5, and I thought, oh, good grief. And I was in Walmart, and I just thought, I went to the kitchen section, and lo and behold, there's it's a plate size, so it's meant to go in your cupboard for your dishes, but it has the great turntable ability, so I can now more easily turn the doll so you can see the entire outfit. So yeah, that was a fun purchase to enable a better view. Here we go. I just feel so fancy now. So, but there we go. Now you can kind of see what she looks like with the actual top on. I am very pleased. It looks exactly like what I had in my head when I was drafting the pattern. So when that happens, I'm always tickled that it actually turns out fitting and looking the way that I had envisioned. Although I had envisioned it in white, but that's okay. I can still make a white one. But yeah, so I'm very, very happy with that. So if you like that, then go ahead and give it a try. And like I say, if you want it to be a little more snug, you can always overlap the back a little bit more, because it wouldn't hurt at all the look of the fashion to actually overlap the collar and the back and make that more snug, and you'd have a tighter fit. So however you want to do that. I kind of like to, at least when I'm first making a pattern so you guys can see it, I like to make as little changes as possible so that you know if you sew this pattern as is, this is what you're going to get. And so also I did not put in the darts, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because it would have just been an extra seam right here that isn't totally necessary, and I think it falls a little nicer without having that dart in there. So for my preference, I think I'll just, if I make another one, I'll still choose to not use that optional dart. So there she is. There's sewing that little blouse, and it ended up taking a little longer than I have planned, and so I don't have a lot of time left today to work on the skirt. So we'll have to do the skirt in a different video, but I'll go ahead and get this one all ready so that you guys can see how to sew this part, and then I will meet up with you later again to go ahead and put together the skirt that goes to the little suit that features this blouse as part of it. So have fun trying out the blouse, happy sewing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.